Hi guys, welcome back to CareerBiome. My name is Maria Namaganda and I'm excited about this episode of CareerBiome. I was interviewed by Sumana Dhanani, who works at the University of Rwanda in Kigali, and she also runs a blog known as The African Researcher, where she interviews and shares insights from other discussions with exceptional scientists from the continent. I am honored that I was invited on this blog and I shared my journey. I talk about my Ph.D. research work, what I've done so far, what is ongoing, some of the publications we have made, and I also share passionately about CareerBiome and the why behind it and how CareerBiome is humanizing research and science, also bridging the gaps between the science that we do in the laboratories and the implementation when it comes to public engagement. This blog is particularly interesting because Sumana shares realities of doing research in settings such as the African continent, and also many people come onto this blog and advise emerging researchers. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the discussion we had together with Sumana. Oh, and I know I talk a lot about the fact that I'm doing a PhD, so if you've ever wondered what exactly it is that I do, this is the episode. You get all of the information and you could also get your own inspiration or craft your own research question based off what I might share. I wanted to highlight that and say it's also interesting to know that this time I wasn't the one asking questions, but I was being in the interviewee angle. So yeah, enjoy and learn from this. And of course, I know there might be a number of things you want to share with us, so do engage with us in the comment section. And remember to check out the African Researcher blog and read about other researchers that are on there. And also remember to subscribe to CareerBiome so you stay engaged with us, and also turn on your notifications so that when a new video drops, you're the first person to find out. Thank you so much for those remarks. I appreciate it. And so regarding my kind of work that I'm doing and what inspired it. So with my background in biomedical laboratory technology, I was mostly in the laboratory. I was developing data in terms of sample collection through phlebotomy, that is like getting blood samples from people, PCRs, we were running DNA and RNA extraction. So what you would understand as molecular biology, but like the technical bits in the laboratory, the wet bench. And during that time, of course, also during the COVID-19, as part of the national response team in Uganda for the surveillance and for the testing. And during this time of being exposed to the laboratory, doing all these processes in the wet lab, DNA extraction, phlebotomy, I noticed a gap that I didn't particularly understand where this data was like ending. I knew how to generate it, but I was like, okay, what happens from this step to the next? And also because of the setting we are in, given like we're in Africa, resource limited settings, there is not many people and data analysts that get to make sense of the data that we develop. So I definitely got interested to, I got interested in wanting to know, first of all, the end stream analysis. If I generate the data from the lab, where does it end and what does it do? And of course, then I didn't have language for what I'm saying now, but I nearly wanted to know when we have, like, for example, we have the results out of the laboratory, what happened to this, like all this big data that we're generating. And that started to form my concepts and my ideas into progressing further. And luckily I was introduced to bioinformatics during the time. It was a new area in Uganda and we are one of the pioneers for the master's class in bioinformatics. And of course, maybe it's like a short time, I may not particularly explain the bioinformatics journey, but it was one of those steps that got me to understand the power of data analysis and how much you can use data analysis to inform policy, to improve overall patient outcomes. But particularly one of the things that I'm perhaps proud of is knowing how the data is generated and now also knowing how it is analyzed. Because sometimes there is a gap in terms of someone knowing where the data gets generated and where it ends up. So I definitely left the wet lab. I am now deep into dry laboratory, which we call bioinformatics and data science. And I know that I understand where this data comes from and I can make sense of it and try to derive patterns, trends. So that is like most of the master's work that I did. And of course, during that time, we were dealing with next generation sequencing as we were looking at virological failure, particularly low abundance variants. These are variants that are not particularly captured by the conventional methods. So at that point during my master's, I noticed that I was not using the routinely collected data like the ages. I was not using data like the socioeconomic factors, data that tells us about how people live, because these definitely affect how people adhere to the drugs. And so again, through that loop, I was inspired to look at the big data and particularly routine monitoring data, including the socioeconomic factors or variables, and how these can inform how a person is likely to respond to treatment. So that is my PhD project at the moment. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds so interesting. And really at the intersection of data collection, data analysis, and also social determinants of health. So I like how so it sounds like you found yourself kind of in the middle of the process, just at the data generation phase, and you wanted to kind of expand your understanding of research to be all-encompassing. So could you tell me a little bit about your experience being among the pioneering classes of this bioinformatics? What are some of the challenges that you encountered and how did you get past them?
Okay, so it's two-way. There is a blessing and also there is, I don't want to call it a curse, but like a challenge in being like a pioneer. Yeah. So the blessing was the opportunities were limitless, almost endless possibilities. But at the time, before entirely committing to the journey of bioinformatics, of course, I was asking around. There is this new field of study, it's computational, we're analyzing sequence data, patient data. It's not common in Uganda, but you had people who were in Uganda and mentoring us. A shout out to my mentor, like my supervisor currently, Gerard Mbowa, has been with me through the journey. They had done bioinformatics, but out of the country. So starting this in Uganda was new. And that meant people didn't understand. And there were questions around, oh, where will you get jobs? Who will employ you? Like there is not many people that are doing this thing. It's completely new to everyone. But anyway, we faced it and went in in belief that yes, this thing will work out. But also we had like very good networks and we could see the potential of it even when it wasn't clear. So the blessings came, or the opportunities came. We were not as many people at the time, but also we had very good support. I think mentorships, the reason I'm very passionate about them is they help someone navigate a path. They help someone see the bigger picture, especially if you've had someone in the same kind of field and they understand what the journey has been like. So that is one of the pillars that really supported us during our starting out of bioinformatics. Yes, the challenges were mostly facilities. When it comes to kind of work we are doing, it's computational. So that means you need high performance machines, you need servers that are strong for storing such huge data, and in other words, limited resources to facilitate the kind of analysis without servers breaking down. And even just if you know Uganda, electricity just goes off anytime. So there are different systematic contextual challenges that come with a field as this. But I think the bigger picture and the goal is that yes, we persevered through it, and of course sought opportunities and guidance from the people who had like gone before us. Another interesting thing is at the time, maybe just before the master's course for bioinformatics was introduced, there was a mentorship class for bioinformatics. So it introduced us to these very huge concepts. I'm particularly from the background of biomedical technology and I didn't have experience in coding. Yet bioinformatics came with a new area of like being in coding, writing custom scripts, using languages like Bash scripting, Python. So it was a steep learning curve, trying to get all the way from what you're used to, generating data in the lab, to actually learning the coding was quite hard. But because our class in bioinformatics was mixed with people from computer science and people from the biologicals like myself, we often worked together and had discussions. We could help them with the heavy biological terms they didn't understand and the concepts in molecular biology, and they would help us in understanding coding. And so it was more collaborative, and this is the beauty of such networks and such opportunities. So overall, what we thought was something that was new, there would be no opportunities. I think that was one of my turning points, like starting in bioinformatics, because opportunities started to open up. I started applying for travel grants, starting getting like invitations to speak, present on different panels. You have invited me to speak to the African Researcher blog. So the opportunities started to open up because, again, the field was still growing, in other words, virgin. And so there's a lot of room to explore, to dream big, and to not limit oneself. And I think at the end of the day, it's usually down to perspective, because another person might have another experience of the same journey that we were in. But I think when you put yourself out there, when you stay committed to learning, when you ask where you don't understand, and definitely also use social media, because some of these conferences you go to, you posters here and then, so people get to see what you're doing, what you're capable of, what you're interested in, and then they can invite you further to different things. So the journey has been, it has been challenging, it has been beautiful, and I'm honestly still learning a lot. Yeah. No, that sounds so interesting. It sounds like mentorship and collaboration were like the pillars of how you were able to just get started along this path, which must have been so difficult, I can only imagine. And I think that also kind of reflects a deeper reality, that the best science happens in conditions where you have mentorship and collaboration, just in general, not just when you're pioneering a new topic or a new area of study, but just an everyday science It's an ecosystem for sure.
Exactly.
Because you could have brilliant ideas. You could have brilliant ideas, but you need funding to facilitate those brilliant ideas. Or sometimes people have funding, but they don't have the community that supports that integrated growth. And so it's more like an ecosystem. And maybe just to reiterate, that's why I named CareerBiome a biome, because a biome is an ecosystem where things thrive and flourish. And so you can't look at things in isolation. There is funding, there is mentorships, there is the networks, there is the ideas. It's an ecosystem. And so you can't look at one thing in isolation to say this is the only thing. I think all of them have to be intertwined to make a good scientist.
No, certainly. I could not agree with you more. And I do want to talk about the mentorship a little bit more, but first, I'd really like to hear a bit more about your research area, especially the way that you use bioinformatics. And then you mentioned earlier that awareness you have of involving the community and integrating that scientific communication aspect. So could you tell me a little bit more about your PhD and what all of those principles look like?
Okay, so my PhD project is on development of a machine learning algorithm to predict HIV virological failure. So HIV has been studied for long. I mean, we just celebrated the AIDS Day on 1st of December, just 2 days ago. And it's been around as an epidemic for over 40 years. That means it's heavily studied, but also because it's heavily studied, there is a lot of data that is being collected. And this is not just data on, let's say, the drugs, but also data on how people are living, data on adherence, and not even just like, there is lots of contextual data. And that is the backbone of my project. How can we use such data, but also with the advent of tools like machine learning, of data science, because machine learning is also taking like another storm currently. And at the point I was like, okay, how can we use the big data analytics, the machine learning, to fetch this data and look at it and see the patterns, the trends, and also be able to identify which persons are likely to fail on treatment, so that we can recommend these for other interventions like drug resistance testing. And the reason I say that is not many patients or people living with HIV in Uganda have access to drug resistance testing. And so we are losing some lives along the line because either they're failing on treatment, and that means we have to have smart interventions that try to use what we already have and the tools that are available to tell us which person, so we can early intervene and also save some lives along the path. So if not all lives, which is actually the goal, and also eradicate HIV. Anyway, so my project is broken down into 3 objectives. One of it is, the bigger role is I wanted to understand what the prevalence of HIV virological failure was like, particularly in East African regions. East African regions as defined by the UN. So that includes Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia also is part of it, Tanzania and Rwanda as well. And so we're looking at the bigger picture, and this was helping us to also try and understand, because it entailed literature review in there and trying to understand what are some of the projects that have worked on HIV, and what are the predictors that have been reported, and what is the prevalence, yes, and what is the prevalence of HIV virological failure in this particular setting. And so that paper is already published. Maybe I would share a link to that. And so yes, that is one of the objectives, to look at the prevalency. It's more like a systematic review, meta-analysis and meta-regression. So there were many methods that went into it, and some factors are, for example, one that was interesting was like the male gender is particularly likely to fail on treatment, because one of the understandings behind it is the males have low seeking habits when it comes to health. So even when when it comes to things like maybe they want to seek help and assistance, it's not as common as among the females. And another one was, of course, limited resources, because again, because there is not like when you look at the facilities, people do not have, things like poverty affect how people adhere to the drugs. Things like stigma. So it was very interesting to look at some of those predisposing factors that make someone fail on treatment. And then the other objective was really looking at, now we went into a particular data set, long data collected over 10 years. This is big data from the AIDS Support Organization. So we wanted to look at the decade-long data from 2014 to 2024, particularly because in 2014 is when the World Health Organization rolled out viral load monitoring. And so we did perform descriptive analysis to give us insights into this data. What have been the policy shifts and how have they affected response to treatment? And then the third objective, which is now where my focus is the predicting of virological failure using machine learning. So far I've trained some base models like logistic regressions, random forests. And what this does essentially is you use the data that is available, train a model, you split the data into test and train sets, and then train the model to see if it's able to pick out which person living with HIV is likely to fail, and then which person is going to progress. So it's mostly a binary class, the success class and then the failure class. And yes, so that is how my PhD is really focusing on. So it's mostly around HIV virological failure, but also using tools of machine learning and big data analytics. I'm working using R programming, so I do a lot of custom scripts and so developing these pipelines to give us certain trends.
Sounds like you have it all figured out now. That's amazing.
Thank you.
And so interesting. I think when you said virological failure, there's so many different reasons that this could be, right? There's the biological reasons, but also, as you have uncovered, the social reasons. And that speaks to a reality that medicine and research don't just exist in a medicine and research world. They kind of exist in a greater human ecosystem, as you've mentioned. And so does that also have some reason in your passion for involving the community and hearing community voices in your research, and the platform CareerBiome that you started, where you try to break down these complex topics for lay people? Is that kind of the reason why?
Well, partly, not entirely. Even before the PhD, I've always been very interested in engaging communities. I think it turns down also to my personality. I love public engagement. I love involving people and also just knowing what people think about a particular area, because I am a student for life and I love increasing my knowledge. So I'm like, okay, if I asked about a particular topic, I would want to know what someone thinks along this, because people have brilliant ideas. So that really informed involving the community. But when it comes to the topic of HIV and my PhD work in relation to public engagement, it ties down to the fact that we are developing all these tools and we need to involve people that are going to use these tools. For example, if I develop a machine learning model, I am definitely going to have to include the clinicians, the data, the people who collect the data at these facilities, the M&E officers, because they are at the center, they are at the sites of where this data comes from. So they need to understand, because at the end of the day, we just don't want to develop models, but we want to develop models that are going to be utilized. And one way to do this is to actually make people understand what you're doing. And you need to do this creatively, because yes, again, some people do not particularly read the publication. So you want to find spaces where you involve people creatively in discussions, in inviting other people to talk about their journeys. That particularly centered my motivation to bring out CareerBiome. I was like, okay, we are doing all this work in research, but who are the end users? Who are the people concerned, and are they involved in the process? And sometimes people need to understand the complexities, but in ways where they can assimilate, they can digest those ideas. Because again, we are not working, it's not important, it's not really of use for us to work in silos, and if the research is not being taken up. And so, but also beyond the science work that CareerBiome does, I wanted to humanize the people behind the research. Like you see, when you need a publication, you might not know who is this person, but these people have hobbies, these people have interesting stories, they have they have ways they've navigated challenges. This will not publish, but they will happily share in a discussion. They'll happily share in a podcast, in an interview. So I wanted to understand, who are these people behind the science? Who are these people? Like, what are some of the interests they have? Because I've interviewed my supervisor before, and he shared his journey. And in spaces as those, I wouldn't particularly understand or hear a story like his. But I've seen the responses, and even for myself, I'm like, thank you for sharing that, because this is also part of capacity building, part of mentorship. And the other thing is, I noticed that when it comes to CareerBiome, and why I particularly am very enthusiastic and passionate about it, is I was often put in a docket of, if I'm a researcher, I cannot be a creative. I always found it a bit disturbing for someone to want to put me in a particular bracket. Because personally, I love style, I love other things other than like science, because those things actually, they are creative outlets. And I've come to understand they help me show up better as a scientist, because if I have an area, even if it's for guys that they enjoy soccer, or maybe they enjoy particular games, it's overall, like, for your well-being, for your mental health, they contribute to how you show up at work. And that meant that we needed spaces to discuss this in a way that is relaxed, not publications, but very impactful, where everyone can be inspired, where people can share their journey. We can see like those very interesting nuances that we would probably miss in other facilities. But the core of all this is really science communication, mentorships, capacity building, and bringing people along the kind of work we do in the laboratories behind our computers, and how can they use this for, first of all, they are used for inspiration, and also to critique us in particular ways that are also very helpful, because in rooms like this you share, also people are sharing many opportunities in such discussions. So I think I could speak about CareerBiome the entire day.
No, it sounds like you're really passionate about it. And I definitely appreciate the way you say that people put you in a dichotomy of either a researcher or a creative, as if the two can coexist. And speaking from my own experience, I always looked at my professors, or the people that I considered as more senior, as if they only existed as a researcher. And as soon as they stopped being around me as a researcher, they ceased to exist. But it's true. They have entire lives and hobbies and other things that make up their existence. And so, yes, absolutely, such platforms are so beneficial to be able to share all of that other and equally valuable aspect of doing research. And the same applies to the participants in your studies as well, right? Like they don't just exist as people who take HIV medication. They have whole realities that influence their decisions along the way.
Yeah, and I think discussing some of these things, like for example, the core of like HIV, helps to break the stigma around, because if we can freely talk about HIV and know that it's no longer a death sentence, someone can live healthy, lives even when they're on medication, because that's why we're actually doing some of the work that we're doing. And so to break the stigma around it, so that the people who are affected in particular instances don't feel as isolated, like to try and humanize the research that we're doing, to try and bring light into spaces. Yeah, it's another component. Yeah.
I like that, humanize the research that we're doing, to just because it's research about humans. It really should be done by humans. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You've put it so well. And so that being said, it's really great that you described a bit more about your research and how you also try to humanize it by bringing on the scientific communications aspect. So I want to talk about the mentorship aspect a little bit more. What does mentorship in this space mean to you, and what principles do you think are so important for effective mentorship?
Okay, so mentorship is really broad, and I came to understand that mentorship is indeed different from supervisorship. Because you can have mentors in different areas of life. You can have mentors in finances, you can have mentors in career, in research. And for me, mentorship, in simple words, is someone holding your hand and showing you the steps to get there. It doesn't mean they're going to do the work for you, but they're going to try and guide you through the journey. In other words, they say our mentors ran so we can walk. They probably didn't have as much support, but because they went through the journey, they understand the challenges, the opportunities, and so they can point one person to search. In case it's a project, they can help you understand the deeper effect of it. And so mentorship is, for me, guidance, it is direction, and it is finding ways to do things simpler from people who understand, from knowledge experts. And that is at the core of it. I know there are very many different definitions when it comes to mentorships. And I noticed that for many people in their career, one of the building factors for the journey has been good mentorship, where someone is able to lead you clearly and also direct you. But I also understand as a mentee, there is a role you have to play. You have to be ready to be mentored, because you have to be proactive. You have to reach out. When you look at the senior people that are in particular positions, they are very busy, their calendars are full. And so if someone is really walking the journey with you and trying to show you what steps to take, then you have to be willing to be open to mentorship, to criticism, but which is constructive. And I also understand that it is important to find people who are doing the thing that you're interested in. Like for a mentor, they have to be in a field that you want to be, because we need inspiration, we need motivation. Because many times this journey can be lonely as a researcher, as a scientist. And you need someone to remind you, someone who has made it across the bridge on the other side of life, to tell you, no, that is part of the journey. It's more of encouragement. Keep going. You can do this. We can try that. And mentorship does that. And so it helps to bridge some of those spaces and also help you to see the bigger picture. And when I think of, again, what the mentee should be able to do is, again, to also, like, at certain points, you're going to have to volunteer when it comes to such getting like good mentorship, like, because most of the time the entry point is not as glamorous into some of the things you want to do. So you want to, if you figure out what is that one area you want to pursue further, then you want to know what are the opportunities if they are not clear. And yes, so again, mentorship can go in like many different ways, and it's clear that people have communication that is very direct and intentional. If someone is not able to make it for a meeting, it's likely that some people might not communicate that. But if you do, if you keep the line of communication open, then you build trust. And so people can take you on and say, okay, this person is intentional in their steps. So open communication comes a long way in bridging the gaps in mentorship. And yeah, and it's okay for people to also learn that they can pivot at any time, and also like look for other mentors. As your journey evolves, you start to see what areas you're interested in, and continuously seeking knowledge and seeking people that have gone before you, I think really goes a long way. Yeah,
I love that. Could you tell me a little bit, you mentioned this in the beginning about the difference between mentors and supervisors. What are the characteristics of mentors versus supervisors, and what makes a good mentor?
Okay, so a good mentor, first of all, I mentor some people, but a good mentor, and I'm also mentored by others. But I think a good mentor has the mentee's interest at heart. A good mentor doesn't, well, I will perhaps not describe it like entirely, the differences between mentor and supervisor. But for some people, supervisorship can sometimes seem very technical and quite closed off. Like, it is work, which is okay because yes, business has to be business. But sometimes a supervisor might not see you beyond 2 publications, like that is all they see you. But a mentor is able to notice what are the extra skills that you bring and how can you nurture those, how can they contribute to your career journey. So it's more like a mentor is nurturing in one's journey, and they're able to cite out, they're able to work together with a mentee to build like a career. It's not just like it's not just transactional in a sense. It is very comprehensive. And of course, I noticed there have to be boundaries, of course, that are respectful, because again, I talked about how people are very busy. So you need to also have a professional relationship and not compromise with the professional journey that you're on when it comes to particular spaces. So good mentors are really good listeners. They're good listeners, and they have the interest of the mentee at heart, and they're able to point out where the opportunities are, especially because most of them are exposed to these very many opportunities, and also able to give feedback that helps the mentee. It's so many things. Yeah.
No, it's so interesting, like so comprehensive, as you said it, like holistic development. And you mentioned something again that I thought is interesting, is that you yourself, you are mentoring people on the one hand and being mentored as well. So you're kind of wearing both of those hats. So what a lot of people might be thinking, especially when they're in more early stages of their careers, is that they're not senior enough to be mentors. What do you think on that? What are your reflections on the level of seniority at which you can be a mentor? Is that necessary?
I think many times people call themselves out of particular roles, but I would see it as a ripple effect. Like wherever you are, you're able to make a difference, you're able to make a change. You don't need to be in a particular position. It doesn't matter which level someone is on. Like there is always something to learn from you, and are you able to translate that skill to another person, to transfer, because most of these skills are very transferable. And I don't think there is a particular level, but of course, as a PhD student, my mentor is perhaps already earned their PhD. So if I am a PhD student and I work closely, let's say, with master's students, with undergraduate students, then I mentor those and showing them how I navigated my journey as an undergrad student, as a master's student. So, and even the master's students themselves, like in their own capacity, they can have, not particularly wear the mentorship hat, but they can transfer on particular skills. And so I think it's less about the titles themselves, but about the change we do with the people that we are with, because at every step of the journey, at every position, you're able to change a life. And that is in how you treat people around you, that is how you share opportunities, that is how you basically, sometimes you just need to be a decent human being. Like sometimes you complicate these things. But I find that there is so much each of us can do in our own capacities to make a change wherever we are.
Oh, that's powerful and so very true. So what are some of the lessons that being a mentor or even being a mentee has taught you just about yourself that's informed your research journey?
Okay, one is to be open to learning, because there is so much, and to be humble really, because this journey, you cannot claim you are an expert. Even the people that have made it, I know, that are in the places we admire, there is so much they're continuously learning. So to be a student for life, to always know that there is more things you can learn, and also to transfer, it's more like of a ripple effect. If I mentored well, then I can transfer whatever I have been given to another person, and so to pass on the good skills. But I think it's also important to look at like the interpersonal skills, the interrelational skills. This of course cuts into like good listening, being considerate in particular areas, because you're working with humans, not with robots. Yeah, so so it's very many things that come into. But I think I've learned a lot to be very It has helped me to improve on my communication skills, especially with the people I work with, to be clear and to seek knowledge, seek understanding where I don't understand particular things, and also to be open to feedback. Yeah.
No, I think those are all just very, very valuable lessons. I think when you mentor others, it teaches you a lot about yourself as well. It's not just that you're a teacher, but you're a learner even when you're being a mentor. So that's such a valuable perspective.
Yeah.
And do you have any advice for people on very concretely how to find good mentors? Because you hear stories from the scientific community about just very toxic mentor and mentee relationships. So how do you identify someone who has all of those characteristics and will really be a guide for you?
One is, again, I think I hinted on this, but be in the places of the people that are doing the things you want to do. Because if you want to be mentored in data science, find the data science groups. And one way you can do that is attend some of the conferences, attend some of the workshops, the internal seminars. And through this, you can start to hear and also relate to people, like basically networking strategically. In other words, when someone talks about their research and the kind of work they're doing, you can know that it aligns with the work you want to do, or it doesn't align. And so to put yourself out there, but also to attend some of the spaces where particular conversations and discussions are being held. And then read about the work people are doing. Because if you want to find a good mentor, you want to find someone, again, technical in the area you want to. So be like, I mean, the internet has given us so much that it's a place where you can do so much good, but also waste a lot of time, like doom scrolling. So you want to find opportunities. There is so much online, but those are the particular groups and laboratories that you can find online. And also, sometimes take time to take short courses. There are very many free resources. Okay. I know I'm panobiting on these points, but like you can use internet for good, in the sense of you could find good mentors on there and start a conversation, send emails, because most of these emails are online, they're available. So how much more do you want what you want? How likely are you going to go out there and look for the mentors that you want? And then you start a conversation, follow up with them. Then of course, because again, not every person you reach out to will be responsive, because people are busy and people have priorities. You might not be in their priorities. To not take that rejection at heart, like to be okay with someone saying I'm not available, or to even someone not replying at all. And in other words, just when you're casting a net to catch fish, you just keep casting until you get that.
Yeah.
So it's more like until you catch the fish. So do not stop. Be relentless in the pursuit of mentorship, in the pursuit of everything that you want. I think the advice I would really give is that this journey also will have like many rejections. Either if you're applying for opportunities, or even people cannot particularly take you on. To know that a rejection is not a reflection of your worth. You are more than that. I think to sit with particular rejections as points of improvement and know, why didn't this unfold the way I thought? Where can I improve? And it takes humility, it takes self-awareness, it takes a lot of grit to look at these particular nuances and be like, okay, so where do I need to improve and how can I do better? So yeah, don't take rejections at heart. Attend very many conferences and networking events. And while there, do not also look at it as transactional, because I think somewhere along this networking thing, people have lost the art of networking, where they perhaps do not know what to maybe start a conversation with. But one way you can do is, if you read about a professor's paper or a lecturer's paper and you're interested in their work, that can be a nice breaker in not particularly a very tense way, but if you understand what research this person is working on, you can have a conversation. So yeah, like to be informed so that your conversations are not really surface level, to know how to hold a conversation with a person, so they can see what your interests are, and they don't just think, okay, this person is here for work. Because again, it's a relationship you're building, it's a connection, and it has to be beneficial to both parties. Sometimes you're going to have to do work for free, again, to volunteer, so people can know what you're capable of. And there is again so much to talk about that same topic.
Yeah. So you really have to be willing to give as well as to take in its mentorship. It is actually kind of transactional in a way, in that sense, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But I mean, if it's mutually transactional, if that's a word, mutually beneficial, then everyone is happy. Yeah,
it's a win-win.
It's a win-win.
And I think I really think there should be a mentorship program about finding mentors. Just mentors who have been through the process of finding a mentor, not even just in a particular topic or area. Because you're right, it can be such a blow to the self-esteem when someone receives rejection or when they don't receive a response, and it's very easy for us to make it about ourselves, when in reality it's just it's just a reality of the situation or how busy the other person is.
So I think that's okay. Now I wanted to mention that, and now there are particular institutions or platforms that have come up to improve on like finding mentors. I know there is. I know of a platform called The Village. The Village is this someone can use to find mentorships. The Village is a platform that takes people's data. Let's say they take your profile from LinkedIn and find out what things you're doing, and so it can match. It uses artificial intelligence, AI, to match mentees and mentors. I think it's a brilliant platform, and yes, they've not sponsored this talk, but I've interacted with the people that are behind the Village mentorship platform, and I'm impressed by the kind of work they're doing. So if someone is saying is probably going to see this or read somewhere, they can check out the Village, and they can find out more about how to find mentors in those particular fields. I think the reason that
Do you think that having a online mentor-mentee relationship is equal to having an in-person, like physical relationship?
Well,
or do you think that there's something you lose in that online world?
There is something you might lose, but I think both have pros and cons. For example, with the online mentorship, you're likely to remotely work with anyone, regardless of their location. And so if that is not a limitation, then you can work with anyone. But if you're limited by like physical space, then you can only see the people around your area. And sometimes people are in areas where they can't access the people they want to talk to. So the online platforms allow for bridging the space between mentees and mentors. Whilst if opportunity is there to have like an in-person mentorship, then it is so important because, I mean, again, while AI has taken over, we still are very social beings. And so there is so much you can learn in an in-person discussion. I think both of them depends on, I mean, very different contexts, but they can all be leveraged for the better, whether in person, whether online. And I know that if the online mentorship goes well, then you can actually plan for physical meetups. So it's
very true.
Yeah. One can lead to the other. So
yeah. No, you're so right. It's a world with limitless possibilities. There's no need to kind of box ourselves into what's currently available. I want to talk for a second about the scientific communication aspect of your work. Did you find when you were first in this space where you were trying to communicate in a different way or to a different audience, the results or the processes behind your bioinformatics research, did you find any resistance or pushback from the scientists around you just because of the way that things were conventionally done?
I don't clearly understand the question. In terms of like, could you rephrase it maybe?
Yeah, no problem. So when you were first starting out this, trying to go beyond just the technical aspects of your research and to share the stories behind the research or to share it to different types of audiences, were people like a bit hesitant to have those conversations with you at first?
Yes and no. So it is person based. I've reached out to some people and they're open, but sometimes they are not comfortable being on screen. They're not comfortable because again, social media, I mean, does so much. Someone is like, I'm not comfortable getting online. So there is that aspect. And then sometimes so yes, there has been instances where people are very open and they're like, oh, I would love this. So it's really two-way, and I think being flexible in approaches and knowing if someone is not as comfortable, you give them the grace because someone has to consent, someone has to be comfortable with particular instances. This is different from, of course, when I go to present at scientific conferences because there it's either scientific conference and everyone is either knowledgeable about an aspect, so they understand what they might understand your work or might not, but the interaction is more neutral, and sometimes they easily consent to sharing their work. Whilst in environments where you just reach out to someone and like, oh, I have this platform, I'm doing science communication, most of them have been very positive, I am happy to say, and we still have like a radar to go, but others are I think are not as camera comfortable, if that's the word, camera confident. So there is it's a bit context specific, really.
Fair enough. It's a bit of a mixed space. And all of the challenges that I think as someone who's trying to push this communication will have to encounter. Sorry for that. All right, I think we're coming up to just about like the end of our interview, and the one question that I would like to conclude with then, unless you have anything further to share, is whether you have any advice for up-and-coming researchers in the space, just in general, not really related to mentorship or any particular area, just advice to African researchers on how to break in or to navigate the research world as you see it.
Okay, I think Africa is so diverse and there is so much we can do with our work. So building capacity locally will help us address most of the challenges that we have. And while it is important to do the groundbreaking research, I would say I am passionately interested in the human-centered version of doing research that directly impacts people. And one of the pieces of the advice I would give maybe to upcoming early career researchers is to be open to learning more about what their interests are, but also to not be afraid to pivot when because as your journey starts out, sometimes it's because you find yourself in a particular field because of the funding, but interests and motivations could change along the way. So to be open to explore more, because some of the greatest inventions come from such inspirations, from such motivations. And so, but also I'm particularly very interested in the data revolution of Africa, where there is so much work we are seeing as African scientists that is being done, that is underway. So many people are advancing in their careers, doing a lot of groundbreaking work, and there are so many tools that are developed locally. I think it's quite important to find such tools to address the problems we have, because they understand the development, or the brains behind these tools understand the context of the African setting or the Sub-Saharan Africa setting, and so it speaks directly to a person, as opposed to importing tools that do not clearly understand the nuances on ground. And so I think there is so much to do when it comes to Africa and the data revolution, but I'm particularly very hopeful because I am seeing so much work that is being done, especially by early career researchers. And I think the sky is the point of view, it's no longer the limit.
I love that, the sky is the point of view. I'm going to use that for sure. No, that's incredible advice, and I think definitely something that researchers need to be aware of from the beginning of the research journey.
And I just need to add, enjoy the journey, because the science journey can be very lonely, so explore your creativity as well. Explore, I think this advice I needed to give myself, because when I starting out in my content creation journey, I got criticism as to why I was doing this thing yet as a scientist, and yet that was quite of trying to box me. So enjoy the journey. If you're going to take on a career of 10 years, be sure to find ways to enjoy that so that you are happy to show up every day to work. I think it's quite important. And I think this feeds into mental health and so much. So take care of yourself, because you can show up better if you're happy, they say you can't pour from an empty cup. So
it's very true. And I think just as researchers, we need to realize that we're not just researchers, we're people. And so if watching football, or if, being very aware of my fashion sense, or doing art or poetry or reading is part of what makes me a person, then you should indulge that side of you so that you can also equally show up for what you've chosen as your purpose. So I think that's really not advice you hear often when I ask this question, but definitely very important. So that being said, thank you so much for your responses. I think we've had an excellent conversation and you've given me so much to work with. I'm really excited to see how this blog post will reflect your journey on research in a very technical area while also balancing these aspects of communication and mentorship as you're trying to build your platform, the CareerBiome. So that being said, I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. Have a lovely day and a lovely weekend.
Thank you. And
I really look forward to staying in touch.
All right then. Your name, it's pronounced Sumana, right?
Sumana, yes.
Okay, thank you, Sumana. Enjoy the rest of your day and week.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye now.
Thanks a lot, guys, for watching this until the very end. Do remember to subscribe to CareerBiome, and until next time, see you in our next videos on CareerBiome.